Saipan, July 8, 1944, Banzai Cliff. Hundreds of Japanese soldiers and civilians standing at the edge of a 300-foot drop into the Pacific Ocean. Below, the rocks, the water, death. Behind them, the United States Marines. The Japanese had a word for what was about to happen. Gyokusai, honorable death rather than capture. Thousands had already jumped. Mothers holding children, soldiers with grenades pressed to their chests, entire families walking into the sea together. Then a voice, speaking Japanese, not an officer, not a translator behind a loudspeaker. One man, standing alone at the top of the cliff, speaking not formal Japanese, not military Japanese, street Japanese, backstreet Japanese, the Japanese of a poor neighborhood in East Los Angeles. He told them they were surrounded, that the Americans would treat them with respect, that dying here served nothing and nobody. He told them to come down. 800 people walked away from that cliff alive. The man who talked them back from the edge was 18 years old, a Mexican-American from the slums of Boyle Heights, a Marine private who had been threatened with court-martial twice in the previous 3 weeks for going out on his own without orders. His name was Gabaldon, and what he did on Saipan is the most extraordinary individual act of the entire Pacific War. Guy Louis Gabaldon was born on March 22, 1926 in Los Angeles, California, fourth of 7 children, Mexican-American family, his father a welder, his mother home with the children. They were poor, genuinely poor, the kind of poor where you know exactly how much food is in the house at all times. Guy started shining shoes on Skid Row at age 10, $1 a day if the work was good. He handed most of it to his mother. At 12, he joined a street gang, the Mo Gang, a multi-ethnic mix of kids from the neighborhood, Mexican, Black, Jewish, Armenian. Boyle Heights in the 1930s was one of the most diverse neighborhoods in America, and the Mo Gang reflected that perfectly. Guy Gabaldon was not a bad kid. He was a restless kid, a kid who needed something to hold on to. He found it in the most unexpected place, Lane and Lyle Nakano, Japanese-American twins, around Guy's age, same school. Guy noticed them immediately, not because they were Japanese, but because they were the opposite of him in every way that mattered. They got good grades, they stayed out of trouble, they worked hard, they were honest. Guy started spending time at their house, then more time, then most of his time. Sumi Nakano, the twins' mother, took him in without hesitation. He became a surrogate son. He ate their food. He slept in their home. He went with the children to Japanese language school every day, not classroom Japanese, not textbook Japanese, the Japanese of a working family in Los Angeles. Slang, expressions, the way people actually talked, the emotional language under the formal language. He absorbed it completely. Years later, he would say, "I didn't just learn Japanese. I learned how Japanese people think, how they feel about honor and shame and duty. That was the thing that mattered on Saipan." For almost 6 years, the Nakanos were his real family. Then December 7, 1941, ended all of it. The Japanese Navy attacked Pearl Harbor. America entered the war, and within weeks, President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066. 120,000 Japanese Americans on the West Coast were ordered to report to assembly centers. Everything they owned, sold, abandoned, or stolen. Businesses, farms, homes, gone. The Nakano family was sent to Heart Mountain Relocation Center in Wyoming. Guy Gabaldon, 16 years old, stood and watched the family that had raised him for 6 years leave. He wanted to go with them. They wouldn't allow it. Lane and Lyle Nakano did not go to the internment camp. They enlisted, joined the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, the Japanese-American unit that would become the most decorated in U.S. Army history. They went to fight in Europe. Guy was left alone. He went to Alaska, worked in a fish cannery, waited until he was old enough. On March 22, 1943, his 17th birthday, he walked into a Marine Corps recruiting office. He had a problem, 2 problems. He was technically underage, and he had a perforated eardrum, a medical disqualification. He talked his way around both. He was going to war. Basic training at Camp Pendleton, California. Guy Gabaldon was not a natural Marine in the conventional sense. He was not the biggest, not the most disciplined, not the most obedient. What he was completely fearless and completely fluent in Japanese. He completed the enlisted Marine Japanese language school at Camp Elliott in San Diego. Assigned as a scout and observer to Headquarters and Service Company, 2nd Marine Regiment, 2nd Marine Division. May 1944. He learned his regiment would be part of the invasion of Saipan. Saipan was strategically critical. The Americans needed it as a base for B-29 bombers to reach the Japanese mainland. 30,000 Japanese soldiers were dug into the island. Tens of thousands of Japanese civilians lived there, told by their government that the Americans would rape the women and torture the men. The Japanese had nowhere to go and nothing to lose. June 15, 1944. The Marines hit the beach. The landing was brutal. Accurate Japanese artillery hit the landing craft before they reached shore. 8,000 Americans became casualties in the first 3 days. Guy Gabaldon made it to the beach, dug in, waited for orders. That night, he left camp, without permission, without orders, without backup. He moved alone through the jungle darkness toward Japanese positions. He came across 3 Japanese soldiers. One raised his rifle. Gabaldon fired first. The man went down. The other 2 froze. Gabaldon spoke to them in Japanese, not military commands, conversational Japanese, the kind of Japanese you used with people you respected. He told them they would be treated with honor. That surrender was not shame. Fighting when defeat was certain was the real waste. They put down their weapons. Gabaldon walked back into the American lines at dawn with 2 prisoners. His commanding officer, Captain John Schwab, looked at him, then threatened him with court-martial. Gabaldon was told, leave camp without permission again, and he would be prosecuted. He nodded. The next night he left again. The second night. Gabaldon found a cave, could hear voices inside, dozens of voices. He threw a grenade near the entrance, not inside. Enough noise and concussion to shock but not kill. Then shouted in Japanese, "You are surrounded. American forces have taken the island. There is no rescue coming. You will be treated with respect and honor if you come out now. Your wounds will be treated. You will have food and water." Silence. Then movement. One man came out, then another, then 10, then more. At dawn, Guy Gabaldon walked back into the American lines, with 52 prisoners. Captain Schwab stared at him. He could not court-martial a man who had just brought in 52 enemy combatants without firing a shot. He gave Gabaldon permission to continue. One condition, he had to take a partner. Gabaldon took the partner on the first night. The partner refused to go back. Too dangerous. Gabaldon went alone from then on, every night. What Gabaldon was doing had no name in any military manual. He was not interrogating prisoners. He was not running standard operations. He was talking to people. He knew things that no textbook Japanese translator knew. He knew the word that carried the most weight in Japanese culture, meio, honor. He did not tell the Japanese that surrender was acceptable. He told them that dying uselessly, when the battle was already decided, was the real dishonor, that a warrior's duty was to his people, and dead warriors serve nobody. He knew how Japanese people talked around difficult subjects. He knew the difference between what was said and what was meant. He knew which appeals would land and which would be rejected instantly. None of this came from language school. All of it came from 6 years living with the Nakano family in Boyle Heights. The language they had tried to destroy in him, the language the government had tried to destroy in the Nakano family, was the thing that was saving lives on Saipan every single night. July 7, 1944. The Japanese launched their final massive banzai charge. 4,000 Japanese soldiers attacked American lines in a suicidal wave. They were slaughtered. 4,000 dead in one night. The survivors, soldiers, civilians, men, women, and children, fell back to the northern tip of the island, to Banzai Cliff, 300 feet above the Pacific. The Japanese government had told civilians that Americans would torture and kill them. That death was preferable to capture. They jumped. Mothers threw their children first, then jumped themselves. Fathers held their families and walked into the sea. Soldiers detonated grenades against their own bodies. American Marines watched from a distance, unable to stop it. Guy Gabaldon walked to the edge of the cliff, alone, and started talking. He spoke Japanese, calm, conversational, not broadcasting, talking. He said there was no dishonor in living, that Japan still needed its people, that their children deserved to survive, that he personally guaranteed their safety and their honor would be respected. He talked for hours. People stopped moving toward the edge. One Japanese officer came forward, spoke to Gabaldon directly. Gabaldon answered every question, every doubt, every fear. The officer turned around, went back, then came back with others, then more. Then, 800 people walked away from the cliff alive. 800. Gabaldon was 18 years old. After Saipan, the division moved to Tinian. Gabaldon continued, night after night, alone in the jungle. Cave to cave, voice to voice, hundreds more surrendered. Then, an ambush, Japanese guerrillas. A machine gun position he hadn't seen. He was hit. Multiple wounds, serious enough that he was medically evacuated to Hawaii. The campaign was over for him. When the final count was made, Guy Gabaldon had personally captured or persuaded to surrender approximately 1,300 Japanese soldiers and civilians. More individual captures than any soldier in the history of the United States military. His commanding officer, Captain John Schwabe, the same man who had twice threatened him with court-martial, wrote his recommendation. He compared Gabaldon to Alvin York, the most celebrated American soldier of World War I who had captured 132 German soldiers. Schwabe noted that Gabaldon's captures were 10 times that number. He recommended the Medal of Honor. The recommendation went up the chain. General Holland Smith reviewed it and downgraded it to the Silver Star. No explanation on record, no public statement, just downgraded. Gabaldon returned to civilian life, moved to Mexico, started businesses, moved back to Saipan in 1970 and lived there for 20 years. In 1957, the television show This Is Your Life featured his story. America heard it for the first time. In 1960, Hollywood made a film, Hell to Eternity. Actor Jeffrey Hunter played Gabaldon. The film was a moderate success. 1 month after the film was released, the Marine Corps upgraded his Silver Star to the Navy Cross. 16 years after the events on Saipan, still not the Medal of Honor. Gabaldon spent the rest of his life fighting for the upgrade. He gave hundreds of speeches. He lobbied Congress. The city of Los Angeles sent a resolution to the White House requesting the Medal of Honor. The National Council of La Raza, the largest Latino civil rights organization in America, took up his case. In July 2006, Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa of Los Angeles honored him before the city council and formally requested the medal. On August 31, 2006, Guy Gabaldon died of heart disease in Florida, 80 years old, without the medal. There is one more part of this story, the Nakano family. Lane and Lyle, the twins who had taught Guy Japanese on the streets of Boyle Heights, served in the 442nd Regimental Combat Team in Europe. Lane Nakano later became an actor. He appeared in the 1951 film Go for Broke, about the 442nd, playing himself, playing who he was. The family that the United States government had put behind barbed wire in Wyoming in 1942 produced 2 soldiers who fought for that same government in Europe and produced the environment, the language, the culture, the human connection that saved 1,300 lives in the Pacific. The government spent years trying to erase the Japanese language from Japanese-American families. That language saved more lives in one summer than most military operations of the entire war. Guy Gabaldon was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. He is survived by his wife Ohana and 9 children. Their names: Guy Jr., Ray, Tony, Yoshio, Jeffrey, Russell, Aiko, Hanako, Manya. Japanese names and American names, together. Let us return to the beginning. A boy shining shoes on Skid Row at age 10. A gang kid from Boyle Heights who found a family in the most unexpected place. A language learned on the streets, the language a government policy tried to destroy, became the only weapon that mattered on the most important day of the Pacific War. 1,300 people are alive, or their parents are alive, or their grandparents are alive, because one 18-year-old Mexican-American stood at the edge of a cliff on a small island in the Pacific and talked, not fought, talked. Captain Schwabe recommended the Medal of Honor. The Marine Corps gave him the Silver Star. Then, 16 years later, and only because Hollywood told the story, upgraded it to the Navy Cross. The Medal of Honor never came. When Gabaldon was asked near the end of his life whether the medal mattered, he was quiet for a moment, then said, "The medal? I don't know. What I know is, I looked at those people on that cliff, and I thought, they are just people. Scared people, like anyone. And if I could talk them back from that edge, that was worth more than any medal they could give me." He paused. Though the medal would have been nice. History remembers heroes, but we tell the stories they tried to forget. Subscribe, like, watch the full story.